first day at All Nations, I walked in, these people here are turned.
Nations is unhuman. Praise and worship be lit. When I had my first praise break, I didn't care if my wig came off. I think I almost broke my ankle because I had on heels.
The stabbing happened. I was driving with some people I thought was, friends or I was connected to or whatever the case is. Things took a toll for the worse. So they planned to game me and, stabbed me a few times, 13 times, and tried to rob me. For me, it's a lot that goes on in your mind in those moments. But for me, the only thing that was going on in my mind was, why didn't they kill me? From there, it was me trying to figure out why God wanted me to be alive.
I always knew that Adrian was gifted. I didn't exactly know what the gift was because he always had his hands in a little bit of everything. But I had to wait on God. I had to wait on God to work in him and through him to settle him down because he was literally all over the place.
I remember it was 2002. I'm hanging around my pastor a little bit more. Pastor Willie Paul, man, it was an amazing pastor. I wish I could go back in time and just recant some of the talks that he had. And we're going to a second service. We had 3 services that day. He was listening to this preacher, and this preacher was preaching on the radio. His whole message was geared around people obeying God. And he was saying that, we just need to obey God. We just need to obey God. And he says, people in the congregation, y'all need to obey God. People in the pulpit, y'all need to obey God. People in the choir stand, y'all need to obey God. And people listening on the radio, y'all need to obey God. And when he says this, we're passing the street and I look up and it says Obey Street. And I am literally freaking out because I feel like God is speaking to me because I already told God, like, yo, I'm not even getting anything from this message that this dude is preaching. And God told me, he says, are you saying that because you believe you can do it better? And I was like, wait a minute, no, I'm not saying I could preach better than him. I don't preach. And he was like, no, like you're comparing a gift. And I was like, no, I'm not, and I began to look at it like that and I began to rationalize with God. And we went to the second service, and after the second service, we came back to the third service, and Pastor Timothy Carruthers, who is still my brother to this day, he preached a message about David and Goliath. I was rationalizing with God. Like, if I announce my call to preach, I'm gonna be fighting against people telling me like, oh, you do this and you did this. I've always been battling with my past. I make a decision and then be like, yo, like I shouldn't have made that decision, but now I feel like I gotta live with it. And I think that's one of the things we gotta understand. Once we admit to God, God, I shouldn't have did, or God, I made a bad decision. The Bible says that there's no condemnation, and he removes us from a place, but we choose to stay in a place because of a thing called shame. Just from that day forward, I vowed like, I was gonna attempt this thing of ministry. During that process, I thought it was gonna be easy and it wasn't, but during that time, I went to seminary and started to take my studies a little bit serious with God.
which is funny because I heard him do Takeover Tuesday, you know, not necessarily on a Sunday. I heard he did the Takeover Tuesdays with the college ministry. That's how I even got connected to All Nations. And I was like, where they have young people who fly, who know the word like that?
What's this? What's this?
The turning point for the college ministry was we did a series called The Club versus the Church. We locked the doors, we said it was gonna start, and we had a line wrapped around the church. It was pandemonium. That was the start. It was the start of everything because we exceeded over 100 college students that series. And that was the first time we exceeded over 100, but it was not the last. So that's when it turned for us. So my previous leader made a decision that, hey, we wouldn't have youth services, we'll bring everybody into the main sanctuary. What began to happen was I would preach every other Sunday and we would see numbers. And so then I went to every Sunday. And I remember one specific Sunday, I was up preaching, I get done preaching, my previous leader grabs the microphone and he says, I don't want you guys to look at Pastor AD as your, at this point, I was not just a youth pastor, I was the assistant pastor at this point. He says, I don't want you to look at him as a youth pastor, I don't want you to look at him as just an assistant pastor. This is now your senior pastor. I looked at him and I said, no. That night I had a dream and the Lord told me, he said that if you do not submit to the plan that I have for you, you're going to miss out on destiny. I called my previous leader the next morning and I apologized to him. And I told him I would do it. When I took over the church, from that announcement, our membership literally was at about 30 people. So we went from 30, in a year's time, we went from 30 to about 800 to 1,000 in a year's time. It's almost like trying to drink water from a fire hose. It was people on a rotation. We weren't retaining a lot. We were just seeing mass numbers of people coming to kind of see and then, you know, put their spin on the message to be like, you know, oh, I kind of like him, but I don't know if I like him. And I don't know, it's something crazy about him. I don't really, you know, I don't get with the jeans and preaching in Jordans. I had literally preachers get in their pulpits and preach against me. So everything seems to be popping. Everything seems to be working. The more and more people that you have the opportunity to influence is also the opinions. You have more and more opinions about who they think you should be. So all of a sudden, all of these where people were praising me, like, you need to go hear Pastor AD. Next thing I was hearing was, you know, oh, you know, he fake. He ain't real.
I think people question pastors' legitimacy for a lot of carnal reasons, because he's young, because he's fly, because he's unwed, because he's super unconventional, because he is unapologetic in his ministry.
If we talk about masturbation, yes, masturbation is a sin. You want to know why it's a sin? It's selfishness a sin.
So I think it's all these things that go against the traditional norm of what church is supposed to look like.
As time began to continue to go, it got worse. Next thing I was hearing was, you know, oh, you know, he fake. He ain't real. You know, all he want to do is do this and do that and do that. And trying to keep your heart in the midst and preach to people in the midst of hearing all of the negativity and hearing all of the lies, all of the rumors. And then some stuff, because I tell people this all the time, I'm not perfect. So, and I haven't been. So some stuff people were getting that I actually did, but they were getting it years, you know, like it happened 5 years ago, but they were getting it and they were saying it as if it was 5 days ago, you know, and that stuff was hurting because there's certain things like, you know, that, yeah, I used to come down to Huntsville and club. I went to Crossroads. I would be in there dancing, having a good time, you know, and it was like, you know, now I'm doing, you know, I'm I'm trying to submit to this and trying to do this. And it was like, oh yeah, he was in the club and I saw him doing this. And I've never been a drinker. That never was my thing. I took a sabbatical leave for multiple reasons. One, I was very, very, very fatigued mentally. I felt like I was fighting every day.
Well, before Pastor took a leave, things had started to get a little heavy on him. So in turn, it became heavy on everybody. Whether people knew it or not, all the leadership, all the staff, we were burdened with things that we had to do, with things that we were going through, and also running the church at the same time.
I remember that day. It was a very emotional day, very emotional time, because Pastor AD had been so much and done so much for many of us that we could have never imagined life without him being in the seat that he sat in so well for just about all of us.
During the time that Pastor AD was taking a sabbatical, I was doing a lot of praying. Sometimes you don't know the ins and outs of your pastor's life. And that's okay. But our job as a congregation is to intercede for him.
I didn't hear a whole lot of rumors because I knew that they were coming. And I was intentional about blocking them off. So I didn't entertain conversations. I didn't scope on Facebook and Instagram looking for stuff. But a few things that I caught wind of was that I knew this was gonna happen. Or I knew they wasn't gonna last, or I knew he wasn't legit.
I submitted a letter of resignation. I resigned as a senior pastor. Not because of any moral failure, not because of anything ill, wrong, or whatever. I resigned because we did not see eye to eye. I did a Facebook Live explaining that. Well, when I did, in the midst of the Facebook Live, someone says, so where are we going to church? And I said, well, I'm trying to figure that out. And there's about 500 people watching on this Facebook Live because I had been away. I had been off. Everybody's waiting and they just heard that I was no longer the pastor of that church. Everybody loves drama, the gossip. So people were waiting to see what I was gonna say. If I was gonna dog out where I had been, say all types of stuff. And I was like, no, I honor my previous leaders. While I was there, they did amazing for me. I love them. And when they said that, something sparked in me, and the Lord was like, you cannot afford to walk away from this. This is not, you're not doing this for you. You're doing this for me. If you're doing this just for you, then yeah, you could walk away, but because you're doing this for me, you cannot. And so that day, I told them, I was like, I'm gonna find us a place. Please be, in prayer for us to find a location. And I made a verbal commitment to relaunch right then. And then then someone asked, how can I give to help you start out? Because when I left with nothing. As I'm on Facebook Live, the drop down for PayPal started going nuts. And I'm like, what is happening? People were giving. And I'm not talking about $5. I'm talking about thousands. People were giving. I end the Facebook Live, I go to Periscope. I do the same thing on Periscope. Tell them my reasoning, Someone asks, how can we give to this? I express it. That day, in literally 2 online videos, Facebook and Periscope, probably about 10 minutes apiece, 20 minutes, $10,000 was raised to start a church.
So when Pastor made the decision to launch out and move from All Nations Christian Center to All Nations Worship Assembly, like I said, I wasn't fearful. I didn't have all the answers because as a member, you're not privy to everything. But if you are going to be under a leader, you have to trust the decisions that they make.
So we are right now in Madison, Alabama, headed to Athens. So I decided I was gonna give away 2 cars. We wanted to do the month of December. So every Sunday leading up to Christmas, because mainly with our church, what we've seen is that November and December has been low in giving. People go through a hard Christmas season. Maybe they're trying to do too much, or maybe they're not doing enough. I don't know. But usually around that time, the church is kind of finances, things get a little tight. You worry about how you're going to pay mortgage and pay lights and do all that other type of stuff. But in a way to contest that for us, I was like, it's the principle of giving. If you give, I believe that God will make sure everything works out, and we got to trust him with that. So instead of it being tight, so like in our natural sense, like when things get tight, we want to hold on to money. I want to hold on and make sure everything is good. But for us, it was like, we're going to hold on to the principle of God, and we're going to give. So right now we're in Madison, Alabama. We're headed to Athens to pick up car number 3. And then we're going to head back to Huntsville. And then I'm doing a dinner tonight, starts at 7. They don't know what they're going to the dinner for. So all they know is that they got an invite through Evite that said King's Table dinner with Pastor AD. And I'm catering a dinner for my top 25 tithers. The only way we're able to do certain things like this, I bought a car out of my money, but also at the same time, this situation, we're only able to do this by people believing and tithing and giving and offerings and things of that nature. Each of you are in this room. If you were selected, you got the email. You're in this room because you are the top 25 tithers of All Nations Worship Assembly. That's an amazing thing, isn't it? We're starting this month off, the month of December off with extreme giving. And Sunday at 12 o'clock is going to be a doozy. And the only reason why we're going to be able to do what we do at 12 o'clock is because you have done what you have done.
God had been highlighting a certain man to me at church for some reason, and I wasn't sure. He would walk past and I would just see him. In the midst of hundreds of and thousands of people that go to All Nations, I would just see this certain man multiple times. So we were in the middle of a regular midweek Wednesday, and during service, Pastor asked, "Hey, who is in need of a car?" About 5 or 6 people stood up. But the guy that God was highlighting to me also stood up. And I saw no one else but him in that moment. And in that moment, God spoke to me and said, that's the reason why he has been highlighted to you. So I text my brother. So I text him and say, hey, I think God is talking to me. I think he wants to give this guy a car. My brother texts me back and said, hey, I'll give you this amount.
And I was like, what? Like that confirmed it even further for me.
So I told her a different number at first, and God was like, bruh, don't play with me. Like, give the amount. So like, I just had to like submit to it. And at the end of the day, like, it was for somebody else.
Then he came back and said, I'll match you. That like entirely blew my mind at that point in time, because I knew with both of us giving to this person a certain amount, we will be able to find something nice, something that can sustain him.
I was already scheduled to give 2 cars, and Lauren comes to me and she says, Pastor, you know, God has put somebody on my heart to bless with a car. And I'm like, what? And she said, I wanna bless somebody with a car. And I was like, are you serious? She was like, yeah.
And before we signed the check to buy the car, I asked the dealer, I said, hey, can we pray before I sign this? And he said, in his 13 years of selling cars, he has never prayed. First of all, he has never seen nobody buy somebody a car. Second of all, he has never prayed before signing on a car. And that was confirmation for me. He said he will never forget us. He'll never forget that we walked in there and bought that car just because of that.
Probably the most important thing that I've learned throughout the process, from Chattanooga to Nashville to Huntsville, has been resiliency. I think my greatest gift outside of generosity and giving is resiliency. The ability to fight through, the ability to bounce back, and the ability to not give up. That's because I think that's what the enemy's out to make you do, is to give up.
I remember stressing to a friend that I felt empty. I had like this empty void. And then that's when I got invited to come to All Nations, and then that's when everything just made a 180 in my life. This church showed me that I and we are stronger than we think we are.
I think before I had an idea of who I was, what I liked, but I was aimless, you know, and I only had a perspective of what the world said Loria was, and I really wanted to be more than just a pretty girl. I really wanted to be more than just a stereotype. And so once I got connected here, I found out what God had to say about me, and everything else just kind of made sense for my purpose.
I want people to learn from my son's story that you don't have to come like we used to do back in the day, where you had to come all churched out and suited up and hat up and gloves or whatever. You come as you are, and he can break it down where you can love God and still be swag, still have coolness about you, still feel good, and learn how to be a good person and love God.